All right, everybody. Earlier this week, the 2024-2025 NBA schedule was released. We're going to take you through a look month by month, hitting up some of the highlights, plus a few quick news and notes regarding the Celtics, some things we've commented on in the last couple episodes. Time to stop messing around. Scream with envy. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will. We're checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me today, as he does each and every time, my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Manakis. What's good, dude? How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Actually, a quick little parenting update. What's not good is when both mom and dad both hurt their lower backs on the same day. So Danielle and I are currently dealing with the same lower back pain, which I'm assuming is a result of like carrying him on one side versus the other side.
I was
But
gonna
I
say,
hurt my
you
back.
guys not using your legs, or like what's going
Well,
on over there? I mean, we've
I
talked
mean,
about Big J. He's a big baby.
he's already 13 pounds, and
Sheesh.
anytime, yeah, he just keeps growing, man.
I
Keeps
saw him
growing.
like a week and a half ago.
Yeah. And we try, you try to use your legs, but for the most part, you're just up and down 13 pounds like
Mm,
30 times a day. If you mess up a couple times, or if you're just like doing it in the middle of the night, can
right.
lead to some issues. And so today we both kind of threw out our backs a little bit. So it's we have this grabber that Danielle had from when she was pregnant. So like a thing that you hold and you can just like grab things off the floor so you don't have to bend
I think
down.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't know if this is gonna work for a baby, but
It's not gonna work for the baby, but it's gonna work for other, like, if we need to pick up laundry off
gotcha,
the floor. So
gotcha. Okay.
we at least don't have to do that.
This is like the
But
thing where you just press the button. It's like a little claw at the end, right? And so you can like
yes,
grab something off like a high shelf or whatever.
exactly. So
Okay,
we have
yeah.
one of those, so at least we don't have to bend down for, like, the little things, but we have to bend down for the king, James
Right,
himself.
right, right,
Yeah.
right. He's got to get the royal treatment. Well, as you know, I'm going to be heading out of town at the end of the week. But should you guys ever need some help, the Godfather's here to
Oh,
pop in,
for sure.
do a
Hey, dude,
do
how
do a
how was your
couple of
trip to
arm curls
Boston?
here. Well, it's like everything in my life these days. It's part one of two. This is just a quick trip for work this past week. Got to go to Fenway though, which is nice. I haven't been to Fenway in a while. They got like the new Sam Adams roof deck. We had like a whole little like company outing up there. It's
Nice.
cool. It's not quite the same Fenway vibe. It's basically a bar at Fenway, right? So it's cool. It's I probably would prefer like seats where I can like actually get into the vibe a little bit more.
Mhm.
But this was also like a company event with like 50, 60 people where like the purpose of it was more mingling and a lot of people not from Boston to see Fenway. But it was cool. But this was a pretty quick trip. The only thing of note was just really kind of uh having moved away. What would we move away in 2012? I think is when we moved to
Yeah,
Austin,
2012.
Texas.
Yeah.
And so I stayed in the Seaport. Like I literally stayed at the Aloft Hotel down the Seaport, right across from the Lawn on D, which I've never been to, but I feel like I'm sure you have seen in many people's
Yeah.
Instagram stories over the last several years. Never even knew where it was. I mean, I assumed it was on D Street somewhere, but I've like I don't actually know where this place is. I see the swings, I see the lights, whatever. Was pretty cool. Walked around there for a little bit just to like check it out one day. But it is pretty wild, man. Being in the Seaport is it's very strange. And I had to, and like people would come up to me and be like, "Oh, dude, like you know where to go, right? You're from Boston." And I was like, "Not really, man. We're in an area that I don't know anything. I
Mhm.
this growing up, this was legitimately a seaport. There was the convention center, there was it's changed names a bunch of times. I still don't remember what it's called, but the Bank of America Pavilion where BLS did their graduation. Like there was that, and then there was legitimately just a seaport, and there was those two bars that we got to experience before we left, and you got to go to a bunch when you're at BC, right? Atlantic Beer Garden and
I
what's the other
forget
one?
the name of the other, but they're right next to each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Whiskey Priest, I think is the name of it.
Whiskey
Yeah,
Priest. Yep, that's right.
right. Those are all gone. So now, I mean, there's so much more there, and like it's actually, I mean, we've been in Austin, we've seen our own version of this here in Austin, but it is kind of what's the right word I'm looking for? Like I felt like a tourist. I felt very out of place in a
Mhm.
city where I grew up 10 minutes away.
Right.
So that was a little hard to wrap my head around. But overall it was kind of cool to actually get to spend time, because I never go to that area when I'm home busy seeing friends and family, and they live there. They're not really trying to go there. So that was probably the only interesting part of my trip. But I'll be heading down the Cape here in about a week plus or so, which is good for a quick programming update. Probably after today's podcast, we're probably going to go dark for, say, somewhere between about a week and a half to 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more. So just an FYI, if you don't see anything for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be on vacation, and then Greg's heading up to the Northeast basically right after. So between now and probably the first or second week of September, good chance this might be the last dose of content that we put out for a little bit.
And you want your boys, audience, you want your boys to be refreshed. You know what I mean? We're going to be hitting it. I'm on paternity leave now, so I've got some time, but it, schedule wise, it just makes sense for us to take a little break right now. And then, as training camp is ramping up, because we're going to talk about the Celtics schedule here in a little bit, but the first preseason game is October 4th. So we're really going to start hitting.
That's coming kind of soon. Like when I was pulling this up today, I was like, God damn, like, all right, well, that's pretty soon. By the time I'm coming back from my vacation, we're a month out, and that feels soon. But that's feels rushed, but also feels exciting, because I do love having the Celtics in my life. And real quick, Greg, because I know you've been busy doing a bunch of baby duties today, I don't know if you've seen some of the most recent news that I want to talk about real quick before we hop into the
I
schedule.
haven't.
We've talked a lot about our guy Yabu getting a chance. He's getting a
Where?
chance. Philadelphia 76ers. So they
Oh,
worked
those
on a
bastards.
$2.5 million buyout with Real Madrid. He signed for a minimum deal, so 2.1 mil, so a good deal for the Sixers. And when you look at the Sixers roster, there really is a pretty big hole in that power forward spot. And they're
Mhm.
going to have to either play small, or they're going to have to go double guards. Like, if he works out, this could potentially be a really impactful signing for the Sixers, because right now Caleb Martin's their starting power forward, with
And he was
Kelly Oubre
promised
and
to start in power forward job.
right. Don't know if that's I mean, that maybe that's just open tonight. We'll see. But yeah, so Yabu to the Sixers. Give me your quick thoughts on that, just hearing that for the first time.
Surprised he chose the Sixers of all the teams, because if he was just going for a minimum, I laid out some other teams that I thought could use him. Like I really liked his fit with the Suns. I really liked his fit with the Thunder. And, the more I thought about it, the more I was kind of convincing myself he would be an upgrade over Xavier Tillman. And
Mhm.
that's kind of where I was figuring him. We already signed Tillman, so that, things could get tricky there. But I was kind of in the back of my mind hoping that Brad Stevens was going to pull off some magic, and that we would have Yabu as the heir apparent to Al Horford, after thinking for a couple months that it was Xavier Tillman. Seems like it's still going to be Xavier Tillman, but who knows? Al Horford's immortal, so he might be playing for the next 5 years.
Yeah, Al Horford, the starting center for your Boston Celtics. So let's dive into the Celtics season here, as the entire NBA schedule was revealed last week here. I'm going to pull this up on our screen so you guys can kind of follow along here. But there were a few nuggets that came out leading up to the reveal earlier in the week. So let's just kind of start. We're starting October, Greg. You already mentioned the season, training camp, and then going to Abu Dhabi to play the Nuggets October 4th and October 6th. Like, that's really coming up pretty soon. So we're going to see exactly what this championship team looks like. So little rest for the weary, especially when you talk about all these guys that were on the Olympic team. So we're going to have to keep an eye on how all of the rest looks. I'm sure we'll get a lot of bench play for those first couple of games. But then just rounding out the preseason here, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. The Celtics will then get to host Yabusele and the Philadelphia 76ers. Greg, I wanted to mention he decided to choose Philadelphia. He wanted to play with another native Frenchman in Joel Embiid. Got two French citizens there, so maybe that played into it. And then they'll round out the preseason with the Raptors before having about a week off, or literally actually just exactly a week off. And then it's opening ceremony night, Greg, ring night, October 22nd, home to the Knicks. Let's start there. I made a comment on a post of KOC was on Knicks Fan TV the other day. We've agreed. I do think the Knicks are, if not the top challenger to the Celtics, they're right there in that mix. Once again, I feel like KOC is going out of his way to not try to give the Celtics enough credit. Did say they're the favorite, but at the same time, you can hear he just is so excited to doubt this team. Where do you stand with the Knicks coming in for the ring ceremony? Do you like that matchup to start the season?
I think it's great. Yeah, because I was under the impression last year that the Knicks would be the biggest challenge for the Celtics in last year's playoffs. Obviously, they didn't get to match up with the Knicks. The Knicks were just ravaged by injuries throughout the playoffs. We end up playing the Indiana Pacers, who gave us a really difficult 4-game series. But I really wanted to see how the Celtics matched up with the Knicks last year. And now this is a whole new Knicks team with a bunch of new faces. I mean, I'm still considering OG part of the new realm there,
Yeah.
but then Mikal Bridges, obviously, and the loss of Isaiah Hartenstein, I think it's not going to be as big of an issue in this first game because no KP until probably January or February. But that's the piece that I'm really interested with the Knicks to see how they're able to navigate KP at the 5. Is that just an OG Anunoby matchup? They just put OG on KP and they just negate all pick and roll. And then what are the Celtics going to do? Not really sure how they go about dealing with the KP matchup because Hartenstein was their best option with him, and Mitch Robinson couldn't really do much with him last year. But I'm excited for that. It's definitely appointment television. I'm sure we'll either get together for it or we'll do a post game pod after it. But we're super excited for the season to start against the Knicks, and hopefully we can watch it with our guy Liptak.
Yeah, of course. And for those Knicks fans in their lives, they're gonna get to watch a ring ceremony. Like that's pretty exciting for them, right? When was the last time the Knicks won a championship? The 70s? Like, come on, that's got to be fun for them to be a part of as well. Of course, I'm trying to poke fun at our Knick friends here, but no, I agree with like the whole Porzingis part of it, right? Because I was thinking about this earlier. If these two teams are just fully healthy, which for both, that's going to be a long shot between Porzingis' injury history and between Mitchell Robinson, OG Anunoby's injury history, like that's pretty rare that's going to happen. But let's just say both teams in the playoffs are going to be fully healthy. Porzingis is such an X factor that I really think it puts a pretty substantial separator between the Celtics and the Knicks, especially when you look at how Porzingis being a part of any Knicks Celtic matchup last year played Mitchell Robinson off the court, right? But they had Hartenstein. It was like, oh, this was still pretty close with Hartenstein, but now what's that counter? I don't think Precious Achiuwa or Jericho Sims or anyone on the roster right now is getting it done to really close that gap. But looking at opening night, we know we don't have Porzingis. I think this is going to be a pretty interesting test for the Celtics because this is where if we have no Porzingis and Horford's the starting center, and then you got to go to that trio as kind of the backup in the front court. What does that look like? Because that's the question for me. Where how close is this matchup now when you subtract Porzingis, and this is what you're looking at. And I think with OG Anunoby, Greg, we're going to be monitoring his health all year. But to your point of him still being part of that new group of Knicks, I think there's a little bit of Derek White in there, right? Like we think about Derek White in the 2022 run to the finals, where we saw glimpses. We liked Derek White, but I think if you really wanted to go back and look at going into the 22-23 season where you were like, I'm 100% in on Derek White, definitely not out, but to be as in on Derek White as everyone is right now, like didn't quite see that yet. And OG has some amazing numbers with the Knicks when he was healthy last year. So I think it's going to be pretty fascinating to just get right out of the gate. If worst case scenario, we don't have KP longer than what we expect, injuries keep reoccurring, how do we stack up with this new threat in the East? And what does that look like? And of course, factoring in that it's ring night, that also makes it a little bit difficult where, either things could be the momentum on the Celtics side becomes overwhelming, or it becomes a distraction and potentially maybe the Knicks are more focused on the Celtics who are, reliving the glory of last season while at the same time trying to transition to the new year. So it's always kind of interesting to see how that plays out and if those, external factors will play a role on that particular night.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think just in general, what I'm going to be looking for over the first month of the season or so. One, obviously, is how Jason Tatum reacts to the whole Olympic fiasco. And then Jaylen
We'll get
Brown
there in
as
a second.
well. Yeah, Jaylen Brown, are we going to talk about Jaylen's underwater workouts at all?
I was going to bring that up at the end, but yeah, you can certainly throw those in right here. Yeah.
Because, looking at the Celtics roster and without KP on the squad, there is still just like the power forward issue. There's just not really a true power forward on this roster right now because Tatum is like the closest thing to a true power forward.
You don't consider Tatum a true power forward? I feel like at this point, that's probably
if
the position I'm more
shoot.
associated with. Say it again. Well, yeah, depending on where that shooting is, but In general, I do feel like I consider him more of a power forward than a small. I mean, I consider him a wing. Like, right, like I think it's more bigs and wings. I definitely don't consider him a
I mean,
big,
he
but I consider him
basically played point guard throughout the entire playoffs, so
right. So it is. I mean, anyone is really tough to define. But if we're going traditional, I would actually probably lean towards considering Tatum that power forward. But to your point, behind that, there's not much. Even if you want
yeah,
to
and
consider
even just like saying Jason Tatum is going to be your power forward for the entire season is probably, especially with KP out. My biggest thing is with KP out, right? Because
right.
you can always go too big with KP and Al. You can size up there if you need to add that beef, but without KP, you're asking Jason Tatum to do a lot of physical work throughout this year. That is it's going to be interesting to see how he responds to that. But with Jalen, he has proven to be just this like otherworldly physical specimen.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that he's doing with his underwater workouts. Again, I love seeing him post that because me as the JB Stan on the pod, there's a part of me that is just thinking Jaylen Brown is just scratching the surface of this like next level of his career. And I'm really excited to see if JB can go up another level as he's done every single year in his career. Like, why would it just stop now? And like, what is Jaylen Brown next level going to be? Is he going to be the guy that actually functions more as the power forward who takes on a matchup against a
Mm-hmm.
Julius Randle, for example, with the Celtics have not been able to guard? Is that going
Yeah,
to be Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown? Jaylen is although he's smaller than Tatum, I think he plays bigger than Tatum, especially with defensive matchups. So something I'm really interested in, even though Jason Tatum did guard centers in the playoffs, guys. I know that.
yeah, and I mean, honestly, that could be not just a factor in that Knick game, but just looking at the remainder of the October schedule, which has 5 games in October before we flip over to November. 3 of those first 5 pretty tough, man. You got the Knicks, then you got a couple easy ones against the Wizards and Pistons, but then you end the month with Milwaukee and Indiana, who you obviously played in the conference finals. So 3 pretty tough games, and obviously the Giannis factor in there as well. Do Jalen and Jason maybe take some of that responsibility off of Al Horford in the regular season? I'm sure, obviously, in the postseason, we're gonna see quite a bit of Al, but Al's getting old. Like we gotta maintain him throughout the entire year. And if he's taking on that extra workload without Porzingis, that's definitely going to be a concern throughout the season.
I'll tell you what, I do not want to see Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown try and guard Brook Lopez. Like, I just don't need to see that. Like, Brook Lopez is just probably a little too big for those guys. So,
Right.
Al Horford on Brook Lopez, or maybe we go double big in that matchup and just like really throw a wrench in things just to reduce the amount of physical impact that Al Horford's facing, Jason Tatum's facing, Jaylen Brown's facing.
For sure. Definitely a theme that we'll be keeping up throughout the season. With that, let's flip over to November. And Greg, you already alluded to before we get to, and I will have it queued here in just a second. I'm even going to mention it right now because I will queue it up here in just a moment. But in November, got that back-to-back first baseball series against the Charlotte Hornets and, old friend Grant Williams, as well as Charles Lee, now the head coach of the Hornets. But the date everyone's going to be looking at, early November, November 6th. Doesn't feel like an accident. Pretty hot off the heels of, the, let's call it in air quotes here, the U.S. Olympic team controversy. Steve Kerr makes his appearance to the Garden on November 6th, and I do not expect it to be a kind entrance for Steve Kerr on that night. And like I said, I don't think it's an accident that it's happening this early, where there's not really much time to go by where you're like, we're on to something else. The Garden will remember. They will remember what happened to Jason Tatum this summer come November 6th.
Dude, I cannot wait for that game. I wish I could be there. I'm not going to be able to make it. It's a Wednesday in
Yeah,
November. I'm
that's a
going to be
tough
back
one.
at work and everything, but I am so excited for that game. I hope some of our friends go to that game so that they can just get drunk as shit and just yell horrible things to Steve Kerr. Because Steve Kerr deserves to get dragged in Boston for this. Like, I hope we just like the whole game, people are just booing Steve Kerr and the fuck you, Steve Kerr chants are
Mhm.
going out. And like, pro Tatum chants are happening, pro Jalen chants are happening. And Steve Kerr just, hopefully he retires. Hopefully he never coaches USA basketball again
Well,
because
it sounds like
of this.
Spo's probably taking over that position. So
Good,
hopefully,
good.
hopefully that will be the case. You know who's gonna do really well on that night, Greg? The vendors. Those vendors that live outside the Garden that always have the knockoff t-shirts. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's gonna be Kerr sucks or fuck Kerr or whatever. whatever they have out there, they're going to be doing quite well that night from a merchandise standpoint. So I do think that's going to be a pretty electric night in the Garden, and I do like that we're going to get that early on. We're also going to see kind of a new look Warriors team. Klay Thompson out, but I think overall
True.
they kind of made some impactful moves to bring in Kyle Anderson, to bring in Buddy Hield, bring in DeAnthony Melton. All in all, 3 out, 1 in my opinion, probably a little bit of an upgrade. I don't know what the Warriors will be, but as always, Steph Curry in Boston, that's going to be electric, just adding to that as well. And then looking ahead later in the month, you know what time it is. That's right. The NBA Cup comes back in November. So after Steve Kerr visits, Celtics do have another matchup against the Bucks. So 2 matchups against the Bucks in the first couple of weeks here. So that will be definitely kind of a good barometer as to where this team is in their title defense. But then starting on November 12th, we get NBA Cup. No longer the in-season tournament, Greg. The NBA Cup, as it shall be called now, runs it back on November 12th. So the Celtics, just to reset, I think it's Group C, but it features the Hawks, the Cavs, the Wizards, and the Bulls. Not exactly a murderer's
It features
row
the
of a group.
Celtics. That's what it features.
Yeah, basically. So this, it would be shocking if the Celtics do not find a way out of this group. If they don't, I'm also not going to be super heartbroken. But as we saw, NBA Cup, or last year the NBA in-season tournament, fun time, man. And especially with the Olympics having just gone through, where point differential and playing through the end of the game matters. I do like that element of it, right? Like, it feels like in these games, especially when you get to the end of the group play here against Washington on the 22nd, and then the Bulls to end the month on the 29th. Like, you're gonna, and I think the Bulls was the same team the Celtics played last year, where they kind of ran the score up, and Billy Donovan and Missoula met at half court. Like, hey man, what you want me to do? Like, we need like 35 points to get to the next round. So we're gonna play our guys. I like that element of the NBA Cup, that you have to be very conscious about never giving up, and not just being like, hey, tonight's the night we lose by 30. Well, if we want to win the NBA Cup, that's not an option. And also on the flip side, we're not going to take our guys out and rest, because we want to win by 30. And in case we fit in the tiebreaker, we want to have those extra points. So I really like that element of the NBA Cup. The grouping for the Celtics, not necessarily the most appealing.
No, they want the Celtics to make it through to Vegas this year. The Celtics lost to the Pacers last year in the tournament, and I think they're trying to set it up so that, they had the Lakers last year in the finals, which is great for the NBA. LeBron wins the first NBA Cup and all that. Great for LeBron, as we saw. He still can bring it when it's a short sample size, and that's exactly what the NBA Cup is, right? It's just a handful of games where the Celtics can hopefully get through. The Spurs I haven't looked at who the Spurs are playing, but that would be amazing if Wemby could somehow make it to Vegas. But any chance the Celtics get to play in some high leverage games early in the season is going to make it more interesting for us. One thing I've been thinking about, though, with the name change to the NBA Cup, and you mentioned the FIBA, just like coming off a FIBA ball, is there a way, as the NBA talks about this NBA FIBA crossover at some point, where they start bringing in some of those FIBA rules so that the NBA Cup actually contains some more FIBA rules? Maybe they try
Not a
out
bad idea.
the goaltending call that I really love. I would just like to see something different besides the court each year with the NBA Cup, as they look
Right.
towards the future of what basketball is.
I like that a lot, actually. I'm sure they'll probably start that in if they ever were to try to experiment, they'd probably start
True.
in the G League, and then it would make it. But I like that idea of differentiating this. I'm sure because it's going to be regular season statistics. Like, yeah, I don't know the balance, but I like the idea that it does have something more unique than the courts, which we're not going to get into. We'll see what they look like this year. But I like that a lot more than just these crazy bedazzled looking courts, right? Like, I think that's actually far more interesting of an appeal of, let's see what this looks like, and how much in a true competitive environment with these top athletes does it make a difference. So I'm with you. I will back that. I like that a lot.
Bring back the Elam ending, man. Bring back the Elam ending. And just remember,
or at least in overtime, right? Like, I think the Elam ending in overtime makes a lot of sense, right? Like, I think that, like, first to, I don't know, 11 twos and threes or something, just like you would do when you're playing a pickup game, right? Like, just make that the overtime. I think that makes a lot of sense. Tougher to do in regulation, but yeah, I'm with you. Like this would be a great experimentation area for
Mhm.
the NBA with real NBA guys without it having to take over the entire season and be like, man, this stinks, but we committed to it for the whole year, right? Like this is a five to 7 game sample size per team.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, you just hope that this year 2 of the NBA Cup, it continues, to gather, like, esteem with the players, and they figure
Mhm.
out ways to really incentivize it for the players to try, because it really did feel like players were trying last year, but the first time they changed the All-Star game to the Elam ending that I just mentioned, everybody tried really hard, Kemba Walker gets hurt, all that stuff, but, like, since then, the novelty wore off and they had to make an adjustment, right? And you hope that the novelty doesn't wear off
Mhm.
you beyond, because I think it's a really cool idea that the NBA is trying out. And I hope fans that just like scoffed at it last year and were traditional 82 game people, they see that this is just another fun thing to make,
Right.
you know, constant news cycle that we're all in with basketball, just a little bit more variance and a little bit more enjoyment throughout the year. I'm all
Yeah.
for it. I've been all for it since it was announced, and I'm excited for year 2.
Yeah, I think it should be fun. Just on the Elam ending, I think that exactly the thing in the All Star game. If it's a close game, Elam ending works perfectly. But when it's a blowout, and you're like, all right, let's just hit a couple free throws and end it.
Right.
Which is why I do think overtime would actually work pretty perfectly for it. But
Yeah, I think it's a good
last
idea.
Yeah, last note here in November, just that back-to-back here at home, Minnesota and the Clippers. That should be a really interesting one, especially given the no KP at that time. I think it's gonna be interesting to see how the Celtics, if Minnesota's healthy, match up with all of that size. And they get the back-to-back the next day, so that's gonna be a really tough 2 game home stretch for the Celtics in November. Let's move ahead to December here. This is where pretty busy first week of December here for the Celtics, where they've got 5 games in 7 days, then leading up to what about a week and a half here where it depends what happens with the NBA Cup as to what that schedule looks like. But anytime you get 5 games in 7 days, Greg, that's always going to be pretty tough here. And in that stretch, once again, we see Milwaukee 3 times before we get out of the first week of December. Like that's a lot of Milwaukee in those first couple of
Especially you
weeks.
mentioned no KP, so we're not gonna have KP for any of
Right.
those matchups, which could come into play later in the season
And that's
for
going to make
seeding.
it tough to kind of assess, right? Of like what, especially if the Celtics are 1-2, or they 2-1, 3-0, and maybe Dame's working out this season. He might be working out this offseason, so he could be in better shape. So it is going to be interesting to kind of assess what we can take away from all of these early season matchups with Milwaukee. But then, as you said, middle of December is going to be taken over by the NBA Cup knockout rounds. And if the Celtics aren't there, they'll backfill the schedule. However they do, we end up playing 5 games against the Knicks last year after being knocked out in the quarterfinals. So we'll have to see what that looks like. So that's kind of the variable part of this schedule. And then in December, the other major date to note is going to be, of course, the Christmas Day game against the 76ers, which was announced a few days before the entire schedule came out. 5 p.m. games. So right in the middle. So this is like one of the marquee feature games that you're going to see. 5 o'clock, 5 Eastern game here. Celtics and Sixers on Christmas Day. Greg, you and I, obviously, we've talked a bunch on this before about Celtics Sixers Christmas Day 2018, maybe. I can't remember exactly. Either 2018 or 2019. Just unbelievable game that we went to with our guys, Chris and Mark. And we were sitting a couple rows behind the Celtics bench, thanks to the Red Sox and your sister and your brother-in-law. And Christmas Day, just one of my favorite days that has gotten tougher. I've got to not no longer being in the same proximity as you for Christmas Day games. I got to kind of sneak it in around my new family. Love my family, but not the biggest
But they
basketball
don't
fan.
like basketball. Yeah.
They they don't like basketball on for 5 straight games.
Yeah.
So, I've got to make my, concessions. Luckily, there has almost always been an exception for when the Celtics are on that I can get it on the main TV, and I'm not, like, watching on my phone or sneaking off to the bedroom to go watch, so
It's why we started the podcast, everybody, is so that we could still
yeah.
watch games.
Still working here,
Yeah.
working on the holidays. So that's going to be exciting. Always love to get a Sixers Celtics matchup in December. Let's move ahead here, Greg. Let's keep it rolling into January. And Celtics, right when we get into the new year, pretty tough 4 game West Coast trip that they're going to be taking. Or not Western Conference trip. I wouldn't consider obviously Minnesota West Coast here, but it's four straight games on the road against Minnesota, old friend Ime Udoka in Houston. Maybe we'll check that, but it's Friday night. Maybe depending on if the stars align, maybe we can make a little Houston trip. OKC on a Sunday, and then Denver. That is a pretty murderer's row of Western Conference teams to come right out the gate, January 2nd through the 7th. That's gonna be a pretty tough stretch for the Celtics team.
Hopefully KP's back by then. You definitely don't want to have that trip into the new year, without KP. There at some point, Celtics Nation needs to start believing in KP's legs, because I
Mhm.
think for me personally, I just don't know if this guy is going to be able to be healthy for
Right.
another playoff run. Like I thought that we did everything that we could to keep him healthy last year, and it just didn't work out. With him, obviously it worked out for the team, but he just like could not stay healthy despite playing. How many games he played? Like less than 60 games last year. I know we rested him a
I think it was like
lot down the stretch.
57 or something
Yeah.
something around that to that effect.
So I just think that with KP, you obviously he's a huge X factor for the team, but the point I made earlier, I'm going to make it again. Like you can't overtax the other guys just to keep
Mhm.
him healthy. We need to make sure that he's back in the fold around this time. If it's not January, it's got to be February because I don't want to see the rest of the guys feel the effects of KP's absence when it comes crunch time in the playoffs. Like I don't want to see Jason
Yeah.
Tatum and Jaylen Brown, especially off of a year now, Horford, off of a year in which they made it all the way to the finals. Everyone talks about how the next year is so difficult because that the finals go as late as they do in the summertime. And it's just really difficult to have your body ready for another 82 game grind.
Yeah, and on that KP front, Jared Weiss noted in his schedule reveal article, basically for the Athletic, that this is kind of the time frame of which, like
Mhm.
end of December into that beginning part of January, of which we should be getting updates around this time as to whether or not KP is on track to come back right during this time frame, or if it's delayed and a little bit later into January into February. So definitely end of December through about beginning to middle of January is where we should really have a very firm idea, hopefully, if everything's on track as to when KP will come back. And certainly if you're going up against Minnesota, OKC, and Denver, the top three expected teams in the West in a 4-game stretch, that's going to be an area where you would love to have KP available. And again, it's, we talked about playing Milwaukee 3 times before we get to December 6th, playing Minnesota twice already, now getting Denver and OKC. These are all teams that you kind of want to size up what your squad looks like
Mhm.
against these top tier teams and who you think you're going to be competing for the title with. And so if you don't have that opportunity, maybe it's an advantage because they also don't get that look, but you also don't really know, what you're missing or, what that's going to look
Right.
like on your end. So it kind of works both ways here. But looking down the schedule here in January, a couple other interesting notes. They do go to another West Coast trip towards the end of the month where they'll hit the Warriors, then back to back in LA for the Clippers and the Lakers. Lakers, of course, always a game everybody wants to tune in for and check out. That's January 23rd against the Lakers in LA, and then back to Dallas on January 25th, the Saturday. Again, maybe another potential road trip for the boys. Maybe a quick trip up to Dallas to go check out this game here and make up for the game 4 catastrophe that we had to sit through. Maybe that's a potential option, but taking on the Western Conference champion Mavericks here on the 25th, that will be surely a tough week. And I think in this particular stretch right here, a lot of these games are going to be on national TV when they take on the T-Wolves and the Thunder and the Nuggets and
Mhm.
the Clippers, the Lakers. A lot of national TV exposure. Celtics with the second most national TV games behind the Lakers. I believe it was Lakers at 28, Celtics at 26, excluding NBA TV, because let's be real, it's not fucking national TV. It's just not. I hate when they include that. Let's go ahead here. Let's keep it rolling here. We'll go into February now. So we're getting towards the home stretch of the season for the Celtics here. Once again, got matchups with Philly. Dallas returns to Boston on February 6th. The Knicks once again. So maybe this Knicks game here, we've talked about already having played the Knicks several times, trying to get a matchup. This month, there's 2 more matchups against
Yeah.
the Knicks. On the road on February 8th and then at home on the 23rd. So going back to the Kristaps Porzingis question, this is going to be another area where within this month, you're going to get Philly, you're going to get Dallas, you get the Knicks, you have the Heat, you have Wemby and the Spurs, and that's just going to be fun with Wemby. Who doesn't want to see Wemby? And then you get Philly again, you get the Knicks here, you get Cleveland to end the month. Like this is a big month as far as for at least, especially from an Eastern Conference perspective, having Porzingis back in the mix to see minus Milwaukee, who they've already played 3 times. How do we stack up against the Phillies, against the Philadelphia 76ers, against the Cavs, against the Knicks, all these teams that we know we're going to run into? This will be to what you mentioned earlier, Greg, how, how's our faith feeling right now in KP being there and being available? February, I think, is going to be probably the biggest month or the biggest test for that.
Yeah, what stands out to me, man, February 23rd, that's your boy's birthday, so it's on a Sunday. Maybe I'll be able to get back to Boston to see the Celtics against the Knicks in person. That would be pretty great. That's my first thought is because I'm just always thinking of ways to go watch games in
Mhm.
Boston because obviously we can't get back there quite as much as we'd like. This year, I believe the Spurs are playing right around the time you're getting married, right? The
Well, I
Celtics are
was gonna
coming.
say I was gonna fast forward to March here. I've got some good news and some bad news.
Yeah.
So the good news is the Celtics are gonna be in the area for your boy's wedding. Unfortunately, we're not gonna be able to go see the Celtics and the Spurs as we will have some other plans that day. As yeah, the Spurs, when we look ahead to March here, March 29th, the Celtics come down to San Antonio, which is the game we always hit because that's the easiest, most convenient game. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours away. It's a day trip. We don't even need to, make plans to stay over. So that's the easiest game to hit. Not going to be possible. Did throw it out to my wife, like, hey, what if we invite the Celtics? See if they show up. So Celtics, if you're out there listening, PR, anybody, Drew Carter, come on down. We'll shoot you an invite, man. If you want to come on up to Austin here after the game, you guys are more than welcome to come kick it with us at the Austin Guitar Pool. We're gonna be hanging out, having a wedding, festivity, celebrations. Yeah, maybe we'll see. But yeah, unfortunately, that is not going to line up with us to be able to go to San Antonio and see the Celtics play the Spurs. But we'll see if we can maybe sneak a TV somewhere so we can catch a little bit. We'll see. She's gonna
Yeah,
kill me.
that I'm sure that would go over well.
Oh no. She already ruled it out. I didn't even bring it up, but she was like, she made a joke about it, and I was like, nah, I'm not even gonna request it. She's like, yeah, of course you're not. I was like, okay,
Yeah,
fair.
it's our wedding. It's our wedding.
Yeah,
It's the regular
yeah.
season
That'll
game against the Spurs. I think you'll be okay.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
no, that's great. That's great, man. Looking at March games that stand out to me, that OKC game on March 12th. Another big one. OKC, I think that's the team I got my eye on in the West, just coming out of the West. SGA look pretty damn good in the Olympics. He's just continuing to improve his game, and with the Hartenstein addition, and who was the other addition they got this offseason? They got one more.
Caruso, your boy.
Caruso. That's right. Yeah, with Caruso and Hartenstein, I think that's a team. I don't know what the over under is on OKC, but I think last year I took the over on them. I think it was in the 40s. This year I'm going to bet the over on OKC no matter what, because I think they're going to be like a 60 to 65 win team.
Yeah, weirdest part about this March schedule, just basically broke it up into two halves, really long homestand, really long road trip. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a very odd schedule quirk where, the last, I think it's like 8 games are on the road minus a quick stop at home against Brooklyn. So I'm always interested in those weird, like how things work out this way, that you're just home for basically 2 straight weeks, but then you're on the road for 2.5 weeks. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just never really understand how some of that stuff works out. And, it's one of those things where I remember last year specifically, there was a homestand where the Celtics, we were like, oh man, 7-8 game homestand. Celtics going to crush. I think they lost the first 2 or 3. And so then it was like, man, what is happening? Of course, everything got back on track. So we'll just keep an eye on that as a little weird scheduling quirk before we close out the season here with the Celtics having 5 of their last 7 games at home, Miami and Phoenix to start the month of April, with Washington, and then a quick road trip to New York. So we will get some Knicks games to really check out what that looks like. Although towards the end of the season, depending on what's wrapped up, what's not wrapped up, we'll have to see how meaningful that is. And then our friends from Charlotte. It's interesting. We go to Charlotte one of the first weeks of the season, don't see them again until the very end of the season. It feels like there's always a lot of Charlotte mixed in the Celtics calendar, where we see a lot of old Celtics faces. And of
Brandon
course,
Miller,
Charles
man.
Lee and Grant Williams there. Brandon Miller. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the Hornets are and where they're at. But Greg, the schedule's here. The season's coming, man. It's like we said to start the show, it feels kind of crazy that basically after we take this next hiatus, we're about a month away from cranking it back up again and really getting everything into gear here for the Celtics title defense.
Yeah, and Brandon Miller, we didn't mention him on the last pod for potential 2028. I think that's a guy I want to keep my eye on. One guy I want to
Yeah.
keep my eye on. I really like his game.
Yeah, I could see that. I think the Hornets, depending on, if they can stay healthy, they've got a team that, at least can be frisky. I mean, are they a serious threat? No. But can they be in that play-in mix and potentially be a 7 seed that you're like, damn, Okay, they got a little sauce to him. We'll see what happens. I think that could be the mix, especially if Charles Lee is as advertised as,
Right. And if
one of
LaMelo
the
Ball is
best
healthy.
coaching prospects. Yeah, that's probably the biggest part of it. But Greg, any other final thoughts here before we wrap this episode up?
No, man. Looking forward to this little break. And when we come back, it's going to be training camp. We're going to have a lot of news and notes to get into, figure out whatever the new normal is with having a baby and
Yeah,
podcasting and all that. We're going to
we'll
figure it
figure
out for you
out. Yeah.
guys. We're going to work on getting some cool guests for you. We really appreciate you tuning in. This is kind of the end of the season for us. So we really appreciate you guys rocking with us this season. We'll be back and we'll be giving you more great content. How about yourself, man? Anything else?
No, I think you said it all, man. Just appreciate everybody who's been following us along. This is going to be like you said, this feels like this is finally like our little break here of like two to 3 weeks, whatever it's going to be. And then as soon as we're back, man, we're trying to find, other team previews. We're trying to bring in analysts from, national analysts to kind of give us their take on the Celtics. We're hitting training camp stories. We're getting pressers. We're going to have a lot of news and notes to get into. So it's coming quickly. It's going to be nice to have some time to kind of refresh. And then we're going to come back strong and figure out whatever that new normal looks like. But either way, we're going to be pumped to be giving you guys as much content as we possibly can, and excited for you guys to give us the feedback that you do and the support, which always wows us when we do get a chance to hear from you guys and see you guys following, subscribing, and interacting with us. So much appreciated. We're going to send you guys out here on this little break here, as we always do, with some Black Sheep Optimists. You guys enjoy your summer, and we will see you sometime after Labor Day. Peace.
It feels like summer, baby. Oh mama, feel like summer. New season got me seeing new colors. So fly, the sky will kiss you. Lips so smooth, I miss your issues. Oh mama, feel like summer. New season got me seeing new colors. Oh my, I'm slipping into white lies and time to miss you. Now you're 3 shots deep that you chase with the Croy. You're looking at me while you're making that noise.